Commander Daniel Hayes stood alone at the observation window of Outpost Kappa 7, his eyes fixed on the endless darkness of space that stretched before him like an ocean without shores. The station orbited a barren moon at the very edge of the solar system, so far from Earth that light from the sun took hours to reach them, and so far from anyone who might care what happened there that they could disappear without a trace. The official records listed Kappa 7 as a research facility dedicated to studying deep space phenomena, but those records were lies, carefully constructed by the United Earth Defense Force. In reality, the station served as the training ground for humanity's most dangerous soldiers, the ones who handled problems that could never be discussed in public, the ones whose names never appeared in news feeds or military honors lists. Lieutenant Commander Grace Sullivan walked up beside him, her boots making soft sounds against the metal floor. Woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for staying calm when everything around her was falling apart. She had seen combat on 3 continents before being selected for this assignment, and Hayes trusted her more than anyone else on the station. The new recruits finished their zero-gravity combat assessment. She reported in a voice that carried no emotion. Sergeant Cole pushed them hard today. 2 broken ribs, 1 dislocated shoulder, and more bruised egos than I could count. Hayes nodded without turning from the window. Good. They need to understand that real enemies will not hold back or show mercy. Better they learn that lesson here than in actual combat, where the price of failure is death. Sullivan stood beside him in comfortable silence. Both of them had been soldiers long enough to appreciate moments of quiet. Out here, surrounded by nothing but vacuum and distant stars, such moments felt precious. The station housed 12 personnel at present. Each one had been selected from the best military units across the globe. They came from different countries and different branches of service, but they all shared certain qualities that set them apart from ordinary soldiers. They were quieter than most, more observant, more patient. They understood that sometimes the greatest weapon was not a gun or a bomb, but the ability to wait and watch and strike at exactly the right moment. Ensign Peter Walsh sat at his sensor station on the far side of the command center, monitoring the same empty space he monitored every shift. He was young, only 24, but he had earned his place on Kappa 7 through exceptional skills in electronic warfare and signal analysis. Today had been like every other day, until his screen suddenly filled with data that made his blood run cold. "Commander," he called out, his voice cracking slightly, "we have multiple contacts, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Configuration unknown. They are not ours." Hayes turned from the window, his expression shifting from contemplation to focused alertness in the span of a heartbeat. He crossed the command center in quick strides and looked over Walsh's shoulder at the sensor display. The young ensign was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he worked the controls. "How many?" Hayes asked. Walsh swallowed hard before answering. 47 vessels, sir. They are spreading out in a formation that will completely surround the station." Sullivan moved to another console and pulled up tactical data. "Ship configurations do not match anything in our database, Commander. These are not human vessels. These are not anything we have ever encountered before." Hayes felt his pulse quicken, though years of training kept his expression steady and his voice calm. Humanity had long suspected they were not alone in the universe. Scientists had debated the possibility for centuries. Military planners had created contingency plans for first contact scenarios. But those plans assumed first contact would happen near Earth, where fleets and armies stood ready to respond. No one had planned for first contact to happen at an isolated training facility with no warships and no way to call for help. "Time until they reach weapons range?" Hayes asked. 12 minutes at their current approach speed, Walsh replied. Sullivan looked at Hayes with concern in her eyes. "Sir, we are a training facility. We have small arms and personal weapons, but we do not have the firepower to fight 47 warships. Our hull would not survive a single concentrated barrage. Hayes understood the math as well as she did. In a straight fight between the station and those ships, there could only be one outcome. But Hayes had not survived 30 years of military service by accepting the obvious limitations of any situation. "No," he said quietly, "we do not have ships or heavy weapons, but we have something they cannot possibly expect. We have 300 of the finest soldiers humanity has ever produced, men and women who have been training for exactly this kind of impossible situation their entire careers." He walked to the main communication console and activated the station-wide broadcast system. His voice would reach every corridor, every room, every person aboard Kappa 7. "All hands, this is Commander Hayes. We have unidentified hostile vessels approaching our position. Based on their formation and trajectory, we must assume their intentions are not peaceful. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. All personnel, report to battle stations immediately." Throughout the station, soldiers who had been eating or sleeping or exercising dropped what they were doing and moved with practiced efficiency. They had run this drill hundreds of times, but now the alarm carried a different weight, a different urgency that compelled them forward. Everyone could feel. Sergeant Nathan Cole was in the middle of a hand-to-hand combat demonstration when the announcement came. He looked at the 12 recruits gathered around him and saw fear in some of their eyes. That was acceptable. Fear kept soldiers alive. What mattered was what they did with that fear. "You heard the commander," Cole said. "This is the real thing. Everything we have taught you, everything you have learned, it all comes down to this moment. Move out." In the armory, soldiers collected weapons and equipment with calm precision. Private First Class Amy Porter checked her rifle 3 times, running through the maintenance checklist from memory. She was 26 years old and had been on Kappa 7 for 8 months. This was not how she had imagined her first real combat engagement would begin. Specialist Kevin Brooks loaded extra ammunition into his tactical vest, while his mind worked through the tactical problems they would face. Fighting aboard a space station meant close quarters, limited lines of retreat, and the constant danger that a stray shot could breach the hull and kill everyone in the section. But it also meant that whoever attacked them would face those same challenges, and the humans knew this station far better than any invader could. Back in the command center, Hayes watched the sensor display as the alien ships grew closer. Their designs were angular and predatory, built for war rather than exploration. Whatever these beings were, they had not come to make friends. "Commander," Sullivan said, "we are receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. It appears to be some kind of automated translation." "Put it through," Hayes ordered. A harsh voice filled the command center, speaking words that had been converted into human language by unknown technology. "Inhabitants of this structure, you are surrounded by the fleet of the Korvathi Empire. Surrender immediately, and you will be processed for labor service. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Hayes listened to the message without any change in his expression. When it ended, he looked at Sullivan. "Send a reply," he said. "What should I say, sir?" Hayes thought for a moment about all the soldiers under his command, all the training they had endured, all the sacrifices they had made to become what they were. These aliens had chosen the worst possible target for their first encounter with humanity. Tell them to come and take it. Fleet Commander Zyrax stood on the elevated platform of his flagship's command center, his 4 eyes fixed on the viewing screen that displayed the small human station. The structure was unremarkable by Korvathi standards, a collection of metal tubes and domes that housed what his intelligence officers assured him were no more than 300 primitive beings. The Korvathi had been conquering worlds for over 1,000 years. Their empire stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy, encompassing dozens of species who now served as laborers, soldiers, and resources for the greater glory of Korvathi civilization. Each conquest had followed the same pattern. The fleet would arrive, the primitives would resist briefly, and then they would submit to the inevitable. Tactical Officer Vreen approached the command platform, his natural armor clicking softly as he moved. "Fleet Commander, the human station has responded to our ultimatum." And their answer? Already knowing what it would be. Every species resisted at first. It was almost boring how predictable they all were. They said, and I quote directly from the translation, "Come and take it." Xyrax made a sound that served as laughter among his kind. Defiance from a species that has not even mastered interstellar travel. How amusing. They have no fleet, no heavy weapons, nothing but their primitive aggression. This will be over quickly. He turned to address his tactical staff. "Deploy boarding parties. I want that station secured within the hour, so we can begin preparations for the main invasion of their homeworld. Take prisoners if convenient, but do not risk Korvathi lives. For the sake of slaves, we can easily replace." 12 assault shuttles, launched from various ships in the fleet, each one carrying 50 of the Empire's finest warriors. These soldiers had been bred for combat, their natural armor capable of stopping most projectile weapons, and strength far superior to the soft creatures they were about to engage. They had conquered species that were larger, faster, and more numerous than humans. This would be simple. On the flagship, Vreen monitored the boarding operation while Xyrax observed with casual interest. The shuttles crossed the distance to the station quickly, their pilots selecting optimal breach points based on the station's layout. "First wave making contact now," Vreen reported, breaching the hull at multiple points simultaneously as planned. Inside Kappa 7, the alarms shifted tone as hull breach warnings joined the general alert. Commander Hayes stood in the tactical center, watching holographic displays that showed the location of each breach and the movement of his own forces. "They are hitting us at the eastern and western docking rings," Lieutenant Commander Sullivan reported. "Standard pincer formation. They expect to push toward the center and crush any resistance between their two forces." Hayes nodded, "which means they will spread their troops thin trying to cover multiple corridors. Sergeant Cole, are your teams in position?" Cole's voice came through the communication system from somewhere deep in the station's maintenance tunnels. "All units standing by, Commander. We have them boxed in at every approach they might try." The first Korvathi warriors poured through the breach in the eastern docking ring, their weapons raised and ready for combat. They were massive creatures, standing over 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and bodies covered in plates of natural armor that gleamed under the emergency lights. Their compound eyes scanned the corridor ahead, searching for targets. They found nothing. The corridor was empty. Squad leader Korath signaled his warriors to advance, spread out, and secure the junction ahead. Watch for ambush positions. The Korvathi moved forward in a formation they had used successfully on 100 different worlds. 2 warriors took point, while the others followed in staggered lines that allowed them to support each other with overlapping fields of fire. They were professionals, doing a job they had done many times before. The lights went out. For a moment, there was only darkness. The Korvathi switched to thermal vision, their compound eyes adapting to detect heat signatures instead of visible light. They could see the walls of the corridor glowing faintly with residual warmth, and they could see each other clearly enough. What they could not see were the humans who had been waiting in the ceiling maintenance spaces, their bodies wrapped in thermal dampening suits that made them invisible to alien sensors. Corporal Diana Reyes dropped from above and landed on the back of the nearest Korvathi warrior. Her combat knife found the gap between armor plates at the base of the creature's neck before it could react. The alien made a wet gurgling sound and collapsed. All around her, similar scenes played out in the darkness. Humans emerged from hiding spots that the Korvathi had never thought to check, striking with blades and silenced weapons that made almost no sound. By the time the aliens understood they were under attack, half their squad was already dead. "Contact!" one of the surviving Korvathi screamed into his communicator. We are under attack. They came from the walls, from the ceiling. They are everywhere. The transmission cut off abruptly. On the flagship, Vreen stared at his tactical display in confusion. We have lost contact with Eastern Assault Squad 3, and Squads 1 and 2 are reporting heavy resistance. Define heavy resistance, Zyrax demanded. Squad 1 has taken 60% casualties in less than 2 minutes. Squad 2 is reporting that they cannot identify where the attacks are coming from. The humans are not engaging them directly. They are striking from hidden positions, and then disappearing. Zyrax felt the first flicker of concern, but he pushed it aside. Send reinforcements from the reserve shuttles. Overwhelm them with numbers. More Korvathi warriors flooded into the station, and more of them began to die. The humans had turned their home into a maze of death. Every corridor became a kill zone, every room a potential trap. The aliens pushed forward, and found their enemies had already retreated to new positions. Private First Class Amy Porter crouched behind a barricade in the hydroponics section, her rifle steady as she waited for targets. 3 Korvathi warriors came around the corner, and she dropped all 3 with precisely aimed shots to their unarmored joints before they could return fire. Section 7 clear, she reported calmly, moving to secondary position. Specialist Kevin Brooks led his fire team through the ventilation system, emerging behind a Korvathi unit that was trying to set up a defensive position. The aliens had no idea he was there, until his team opened fire at point-blank range. These things are tough, one of his soldiers commented. Takes at least 3 shots to bring them down. Then use 4, Brooks replied, and keep moving. Never let them know where we will strike next. Back on the flagship, Zyrax was no longer amused. Reports from the boarding parties painted a picture of disaster. His warriors were being slaughtered by an enemy they could barely see, an enemy that refused to stand and fight like proper soldiers. How is this possible? He demanded. They are primitives. They should be cowering in fear, not hunting our warriors like prey. Vreen had no answer. He could only watch as more and more icons on his tactical display changed from active to deceased. Commander Hayes allowed himself a small smile as he watched the same data from the human perspective. The plan was working perfectly. His soldiers were using every advantage they had. Station provided, every trick they had learned in years of specialized training. Eastern docking ring is almost clear, Sullivan reported. Western ring is holding them at Junction 7. They cannot advance, and they cannot retreat. Maintain pressure, Hayes ordered. Do not let them regroup or adapt. Keep them confused and frightened. For the first time in over 1,000 years of conquest, the Korvathi Empire had encountered something they did not understand. They had found an enemy that did not fight by any rules they recognized, an enemy that treated war not as a contest of strength, but as an art form to be mastered. And they were only beginning to learn how costly that lesson would be. The Korvathi warrior never saw the blade that ended his life. One moment he was scanning the darkened corridor with his thermal sensors, searching for any sign of the human defenders who had killed so many of his comrades. The next moment, a hand clamped over his mandibles to prevent him from crying out, while something sharp and cold slid between the plates of his armor. Specialist Kevin Brooks lowered the body silently to the floor, making sure the alien's weapon did not clatter against the metal deck. Around him in the darkness, his squad moved like ghosts, each soldier finding a target and eliminating it without sound or wasted motion. They had trained for this kind of fighting for years, learning to move through darkness, learning to kill quietly, learning to use fear as a weapon just as deadly as any rifle. Now all that training was paying dividends in alien blood. Corridor clear, Brooks whispered into his throat microphone. Moving to secondary. Throughout the station, similar reports flowed into the command center, where Commander Hayes and Lieutenant Commander Sullivan coordinated the defense. The holographic tactical display showed the disposition of forces, blue icons for human soldiers, and red icons for the invaders. The red icons were disappearing at an alarming rate. Eastern docking ring is completely secure, Sullivan reported. We have eliminated approximately 200 enemy combatants, with only 4 wounded on our side, none seriously. Hayes nodded, but kept his expression neutral. The battle was going well, better than he had dared hope, but it was far from over. The alien fleet still surrounded the station, and they still had thousands of warriors in reserve. What is the status of the Western Ring? He asked. Sergeant Cole's team has them pinned at Junction 7, Sullivan responded. The aliens tried to set up a defensive position, but our people keep hitting them from unexpected angles. They cannot figure out where the attacks are coming from. In the Western docking ring, Sergeant Nathan Cole pressed his back against a bulkhead and counted the seconds between enemy shots. The Korvathi were disciplined. He had to give them that. Even after losing half their numbers, they maintained formation and kept firing at any movement they detected. But they were fighting blind, relying on thermal sensors that could not detect humans in thermal dampening suits. And they were fighting scared, which made them predictable. Cole signaled to Private First Class Amy Porter, who was crouched behind an equipment crate 10 meters away. She nodded and pulled a flash grenade from her vest. The device would overload Korvathi visual sensors for several crucial seconds. She threw the grenade with perfect accuracy, and when it detonated in a burst of blinding light, Cole and his team surged forward. The next 30 seconds were violent and brutal, clashed at close range, and the superior Korvathi strength meant nothing when the humans refused to engage them directly. Cole shot one warrior in the joint of its lower right arm, and when the creature turned toward him, Porter put 3 rounds into the back of its head. Junction 7 secure, Cole reported when the fighting stopped, pushing forward to the breach point. On the Korvathi flagship, Fleet Commander Zyrax stared at the tactical displays with growing horror. He had sent 600 of his finest warriors into that station, and more than half of them were already dead. How is this happening? He demanded of his officers. They are a primitive species. They have no advanced technology, no genetic enhancements, nothing but basic projectile weapons. Tactical Officer Vreen worked his console with trembling appendages. Commander, I have been analyzing the sensor data from our surviving warriors. The humans are not fighting us with superior weapons or numbers. They are fighting us with superior tactics. Explain. They know every centimeter of that station, every corridor, every room, every maintenance shaft and ventilation duct. They are using that knowledge to appear where we do not expect them, and disappear before we can respond. They strike our warriors from behind, from above, from angles that should be impossible. Zyrax slammed his fist against the arm of his command chair. They are vermin, hiding in walls, nothing more. With respect, Commander, they are considerably more than that. In over 1,000 years of conquest, we have never lost this many warriors to a single engagement against such a small defending force. These humans are not ordinary soldiers. Inside the station, Corporal Diana Reyes led her fire team through the hydroponics bay toward a group of Korvathi, who had managed to establish a fortified position. The aliens had pushed tables and equipment into a defensive barrier that blocked the main corridor, and their heavy weapons covered every approach they could see at least. Reyes had spent 3 months memorizing the layout of the hydroponics section during her training. She knew that the irrigation system ran through channels in the ceiling, channels that were just wide enough for a human to crawl through. Stay here and keep them focused on this position, she told her team. I will signal when I am ready. She climbed into the ceiling and began the slow, cramped journey through the irrigation channels. The space was tight and dark, and the metal pressed against her shoulders, but she had crawled through worse during training exercises. 5 minutes later, she was directly above the Korvathi position. She could see them through the gaps in the ceiling panels. 7 warriors watching the corridor, with weapons ready, completely unaware of the danger above them. Reyes opened the ceiling panel and dropped 2 grenades into their midst before pulling herself back. The explosions were followed by screams and the sound of bodies hitting the floor. "Position cleared," she reported as she dropped down to confirm the kills. "We have a clear path to the western breach point." Commander Hayes received the report and updated his tactical assessment. The battle had reached its final phase. The surviving Korvathi had been pushed back to the two breach points where they had entered the station, and they were surrounded by human forces that vastly outnumbered them now that so many of their comrades had fallen. "All units," Hayes broadcast, "begin final push. No survivors, no prisoners. End this." The last Korvathi warriors died fighting, which was the only honorable death their culture recognized. But honor meant nothing against enemies who attacked from every direction simultaneously, who used the environment itself as a weapon, who showed no fear and no hesitation. Alien fell less than 2 hours after the boarding had begun. His last transmission was a desperate plea for reinforcement that would never come. In the command center, Sullivan checked the final casualty reports. "Battle is over, Commander. We have eliminated all enemy combatants. Our casualties are 12 wounded, none killed." Hayes absorbed this information with quiet satisfaction. "Secure all breach points and begin collecting the fallen. We will treat their dead with respect. Whatever else they were soldiers doing their duty." He turned to look at the main viewing screen, which showed the alien fleet still surrounding the station. 47 warships, with enough firepower to reduce Kappa 7 to atoms. Yet they had not fired. They were waiting, Hayes realized. Waiting to see what would happen. Waiting to understand what they were dealing with. "Open a communication channel to the enemy flagship," he ordered. Sullivan looked at him with surprise. "Sir, what do you intend to say to them?" Hayes thought about the men and women under his command, about the years of training that had prepared them for exactly this moment, about the message that humanity needed to send to the stars. "I intend to educate them." Fleet Commander Zyrax stood motionless on his command platform, staring at the tactical display that showed nothing but death. 600 warriors had boarded that primitive station, and not a single one remained alive. The entire operation had taken less than 2 hours. In over 1,000 years of conquest, the Korvathi Empire had never suffered such a complete and humiliating defeat. "Commander," Tactical Officer Vreen said hesitantly, "the human station is hailing us. They wish to communicate." Zyrax wanted to order his ships to open fire, to reduce that accursed station to dust and atoms as punishment for the warriors it had consumed. But something held him back, a feeling he had not experienced in decades of military service. It was uncertainty. And underneath that uncertainty was something even more unfamiliar. It was fear. "Accept the transmission," he ordered. The main viewing screen flickered and displayed a human face. Male of middle years, with gray hair and steady eyes that showed no hint of fear or desperation. This creature had just defeated 600 Korvathi warriors with a force half that size, and he looked as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "I am Commander Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. "You have attacked an installation under my command, and your boarding parties have been neutralized. You now have a choice before you." Zyrax forced his voice to remain steady. "What choice would that be, human?" "You can continue this engagement and learn exactly how many more of your soldiers we can kill. We have ammunition remaining and plenty of places to hide. If you send another 600 warriors, we will kill them just as we killed the first wave. If you send 1,000, we will find a way to kill them too." "Or," Zyrax asked, "or you can withdraw from this system and take a message back to your leaders. A message about how we stopped this aggression, humanity, and what they can expect if they pursue this conflict." On the Korvathi flagship, Vreen and the other officers watched their commander in silence. None of them had ever seen Zyrax hesitate like this. The fleet commander had conquered entire worlds with less deliberation. "What message would you have me carry?" Zyrax finally asked. Hayes leaned slightly forward, and something in his eyes, made Xyrax want to look away. Tell your leaders that this station is where we train our soldiers. This is not a military base or a fortress. This is a school where young humans learn the basics of combat. He paused to let that information sink in before continuing. The men and women who destroyed your boarding parties today are considered students, not masters. They are here to learn skills that they will spend the rest of their careers refining. The instructors who teach them are far more dangerous, and there are facilities across Earth where warriors far more skilled than anyone on this station train for conflicts we hope will never come. Xyrax felt his certainty crumbling with each word the human spoke. You are bluffing. No species can be this formidable. Am I bluffing? Hayes asked. You sent 600 of what I assume were experienced warriors against 300 trainees, and you lost every single one without killing a single human. Does that feel like a bluff to you? The fleet commander had no response to that. Let me tell you something about my species, Hayes continued. We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We have made war into an art form. Every generation has refined the techniques of the previous one, finding new ways to kill, new strategies to defeat enemies who should have been unbeatable. We have conquered dozens of species, Xyrax said, trying to regain some dignity. We have never encountered an enemy we could not defeat. Then let me be clear about what you should understand. Have encountered today. Earth has billions of humans, and millions of them are trained for combat. We have weapons you have not seen, and tactics you cannot imagine. The soldiers who defeated you today represent the most basic level of our military capability. Hayes stood straighter, his voice taking on a quality that transcended the translation technology. A quality of absolute conviction. If you come to our world seeking conquest, you will not find the easy victory you expected. You will find a species that has spent its entire existence fighting for survival against itself. You will find soldiers who know how to fight in every environment, under every condition, against any enemy. You will find that the cost of conquering Earth is far higher than any prize it might offer. Xyrax wanted to dismiss these words as the desperate boasts of a cornered animal, but he could not. The evidence of human capability floated in the station before him. 100 dead warriors. What do you want? He asked. I want you to leave this system and never return. I want you to tell your empire that humanity is not a target, but a potential partner for those who approach us with respect. And I want you to remember one final thing. What is that? Hayes allowed himself a small, cold smile. Everything that happened today, the ambushes, the tactics, the precision, all of it was just a training exercise for us. We were not fighting at our full capability. We were practicing. The communication ended, and Xyrax stood in silence for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for orders that did not come. Finally, Vreen spoke. Commander, what are your instructions? Xyrax looked at the human station one last time. It seemed so small and fragile. Yet, it had consumed an entire boarding force without apparent effort. The humans inside were probably already resetting their defenses, preparing for another attack. That Xyrax had no intention of launching. Order the fleet to withdraw, he said quietly. Commander? Vreen's surprise was evident. We came here expecting easy prey. We found something else entirely. The Council needs to know what we have discovered. They need to understand that these humans are not like other species. He turned away from the viewing screen and walked toward his private quarters. We will return to the homeworld and make our report. Let wiser heads than mine decide how to proceed with this species. What will you tell the Council? Vreen asked. Xyrax paused at the door. I will tell them the truth. We attacked what we thought was a weak and isolated outpost. We discovered instead that it was a training facility for warriors who make our finest soldiers look like children playing at war. He shook his head slowly. I will tell them that if we want to conquer Earth, we had better be prepared to lose our entire empire in the attempt. Because these humans will not surrender, they will not submit, and they will make us pay for every meter of ground in blood. As the Korvathi fleet powered up its engines and prepared to leave the system, Commander Hayes watched from the observation window of Kappa 7. Behind him, his soldiers were already beginning the work of repairing the damage and preparing for whatever came next. "Do you think they will come back?" Sullivan asked. "Eventually," Hayes replied. "Maybe not them specifically, but someone will. The universe is vast and full of species who think they can take what they want through force." He turned to face her, but now they know something they did not know before. They know that humanity is not easy prey. They know that we can fight and we can win, and that knowledge will spread. Sullivan nodded. "What happens now?" "Now we send a report to Earth Command, and then we get back to work. Our students still have a lot to learn, and the universe just got a lot more dangerous." He looked out at the stars where the alien fleet was already beginning to disappear. "Class is in session," he said quietly, "and school is never really over." The Korvathi fleet vanished from human sensors 3 hours after Commander Hayes delivered his message. They left behind the wreckage of their boarding pods and the bodies of 600 warriors who had expected easy victory and found something very different. Hayes ordered his soldiers to collect the alien dead and store them in a sealed cargo bay with appropriate respect. Whatever else the Korvathi had been, they were soldiers who had followed orders and fought bravely according to their own traditions. Even enemies deserved dignity in death. News of the attack spread across Earth within days, carried by emergency transmissions that could not be ignored or suppressed. For the first time in human history, people everywhere learned that they were not alone in the universe, and that the universe was not friendly. The reaction was complicated. Fear mixed with excitement, uncertainty mixed with determination. Religious leaders offered interpretations that ranged from apocalyptic warnings to celebrations of cosmic significance. Politicians made speeches about unity and preparedness, while scientists demanded access to the alien technology and biological samples recovered from the station. Through it all, the soldiers of Kappa 7 continued their work. They repaired the damage to their station, analyzed the tactics that had worked and those that needed improvement, and prepared for whatever would come next. Commander Daniel Hayes found himself promoted to Admiral and summoned to Earth to oversee the creation of a new planetary defense initiative. The politicians wanted him in charge because he had proven that humans could fight and win against extraterrestrial threats. They saw him as a symbol of human capability and resilience. What they did not fully understand was that the victory at Kappa 7 had not been about superior weapons or advanced technology. It had been about will and adaptability, about the human capacity for creative violence when survival was at stake. It had been about soldiers who refused to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. Lieutenant Commander Grace Sullivan took command of Kappa 7 in his absence. The station received triple its previous funding and personnel as governments around the world suddenly discovered the importance of military training facilities in deep space. New recruits arrived every month, eager to learn the skills that had saved humanity from its first alien encounter. Sergeant Nathan Cole became the station's senior combat instructor, responsible for turning raw recruits into the kind of soldiers who could face any threat. He pushed his students hard, harder than ever before, because he understood that the Korvathi would not be the last aliens to test human resolve. Private First Class Amy Porter earned a promotion and a medal for her actions during the battle, but she cared more about the skills she had developed than any decoration. Faced creatures from another world, and survived through training and determination. That knowledge changed how she saw herself and her place in the universe. Specialist Kevin Brooks transferred to a classified research facility where human scientists were studying the captured alien weapons and armor. His combat experience proved valuable in understanding how the Korvathi approached warfare, and his insights helped shape the development of new defensive technologies. Corporal Diana Reyes was offered a position training special operations units on Earth, teaching them the close-quarters combat techniques that had proven so effective aboard the station. She accepted because she believed that every human who learned to fight effectively was a resource the species could not afford to waste. Across the galaxy, the story of Kappa 7 spread through diplomatic channels and intelligence networks that humans never knew existed. Other species learned what the Korvathi had discovered, that the small blue world at the edge of an unremarkable solar system was not the easy conquest it appeared to be. The Korvathi themselves never returned to human space. Their empire, which had conquered dozens of species across thousands of years, issued an official declaration advising all member worlds to avoid contact with humanity entirely. The declaration included a phrase that human linguists eventually translated as something between too costly to subdue and not worth the blood price. Some species took this as a warning and stayed far from human territory. Others saw it as a challenge and began making plans of their own. The universe was vast and full of civilizations with their own ambitions and their own ideas about humanity's place in the cosmic order. Admiral Hayes understood this better than most. He had seen the Korvathi warriors up close, had studied their tactics and their technology, had learned enough about their culture to know that they were not uniquely aggressive or warlike by galactic standards. If anything, they were average representatives of a universe where strength determined survival. That meant more conflicts would come, more species would test humanity's defenses, more aliens would assume that a young civilization without interstellar travel must be weak and vulnerable. Each time, humans would have to prove them wrong. But Hayes also felt something he had not expected when he looked out at the stars from his new command center on Earth. He felt hope. Humanity had spent millennia fighting itself, perfecting the arts of war and survival through countless conflicts that had shaped every aspect of human civilization. All that blood, all that suffering, all that hard-won knowledge of how to fight and kill and endure had suddenly found a purpose beyond mutual destruction. The universe had sent a test, and humanity had passed. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority. Message from deep space monitoring stations. Hayes answered it himself, knowing what it would likely contain. "Admiral," said the young officer on the screen, "we have detected another fleet entering the outer system. Configuration unknown. They are not Korvathi." Hayes took a deep breath and straightened his uniform. Behind him, his staff began activating defense protocols and alerting military units across the planet. This was the new reality, a constant state of vigilance against threats that could appear at any moment. "How many ships?" he asked. "Preliminary count is 147 vessels, sir. 3 times the size of the First Fleet." Hayes nodded slowly. Some species had taken the Korvathi warning seriously. Others apparently had not. This new civilization would learn the same lessons, but they would learn them at a much higher cost. "Sound general quarters across all defense installations. Scramble all available combat units to intercept positions. And get me a communication channel to that fleet." "Sir, we do not know their language yet." "Then they will learn ours, one way or another." He turned to face his staff, the men and women who would lead humanity's defense against whatever the universe threw at them. They were the best Earth had to offer, trained by instructors who had learned their craft at Kappa 7 and facilities like it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes said, "class is back in session." Outside the window, ships were launching from orbital defense platforms, forming into battle groups that would meet the alien fleet at the edge of the system. Somewhere out there, 147 starships full of beings who thought humanity would be easy prey were about to receive an education. And humanity's teachers were very good at their jobs. The stars held countless civilizations, countless threats, countless challenges that humanity had never imagined facing. But they also held countless opportunities for a species willing to fight for its place among them. Admiral Hayes watched the defense fleet move into position and allowed himself a small smile. The Korvathi had called humanity primitives, creatures without advanced technology or interstellar capability. They had been right about the technology, at least for now, but they had been very wrong about what that meant, because humans did not need advanced weapons to be dangerous. They only needed the will to survive, and the knowledge of how to make their enemies pay for every attempt to take that survival away. The universe was about to learn that lesson again, and again, and as many times as necessary.